Should we get started? So, for the next 2 hours, we're going to talk about brain inflammation. And I don't have a lot of slides on this topic, and that's because what I want to do is focus on the diagrams that I have. If you understand the diagrams, you'll understand everything. So we're going to focus on the diagrams. And believe it or not, even though our topic is brain inflammation, which can also be called neuroinflammation, I almost forgot that I just published an article on this topic last month. And this is it. So I published this letter in a journal called Nature Reviews Rheumatology. Probably one of the top, in my opinion, one of the top 3 journals in rheumatology. And every once in a while, what I like to do is test my ideas, and I have 2 or 3 ways of testing my ideas. One is to teach, like students, because they're always critical and they're always looking for something to complain about. So if I teach to students, then somebody will complain about something, and that's a way for me to test my ideas. The other way is giving presentations like this, because usually somebody will say they disagree or something like that, and we can try to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And the other way that I test my ideas is I publish them in big journals like this, every once in a while. So the advantage to publishing in big journals like this one is it's a way, like I said before, it's a way to test my ideas and see if I can get them past a certain level of critique. But the problem with publishing in journals like this is that they usually don't provide much space. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Noam Chomsky in the United States. Maybe most of you. Noam Chomsky is a linguist, and he talks about argument and like the structure of arguments. Well, one of the ways to win an argument is to simply limit the amount of time that you give your opponent. And that definitely occurs in science, because we all, like, the big journals always put limits, right? You only have so much space, you can only use so many citations. So that's one of the ways that they're able to win their arguments. And most big journals are friendly towards drug companies. So they tend to want to support and publish big articles from drug companies. And maybe some of you know why that is. It's because if they publish an article that's friendly to the drug companies, then the drug companies will buy reprints of the article and distribute those to doctors. So it's a way that the journal makes money, is by publishing articles that they know they can sell to the drug companies, right? Well, because that's why they don't want to publish on nutrition, because nutrition companies won't do the same thing. Nutrition companies won't buy an article and send it to doctors. But the drug companies do it all the time. So part of what I do is when I see something that I don't like, I sometimes try to write a rebuttal to it, like I did with this article. And the reason that that's relevant for today's conversation is that, as I'm sure many of you know, what we see in science these days is contamination of that science and twisting of science so that it promotes a certain model of disease, which, of course, then sells more drugs and keeps people dependent. And I think diabetes is a great example of that. I think the cause and cure of diabetes is very straightforward. but people have to remain, the population has to be confused, right? Otherwise, they would cure their own problems and they wouldn't be dependent on drug companies. This is our after lunch chat. But another really great example of the exploitation of science is in fibromyalgia. It's perfect. Fibromyalgia, in my opinion, has been completely hijacked by the drug companies. And this article represents some of that conversation. So what I find with fibromyalgia is that by far, perhaps 100%, of the review articles are written by people who work for drug companies. And what would you expect their conclusion to be? Their conclusion of fibromyalgia is that it has no identifiable cause, that these patients have what's called central sensitization, which means that they have altered perception of pain signals within their brain, which causes them to be extra sensitive to pain. And because fibromyalgia has no cause that's been identified, and because these patients have this central sensitization problem within their brain, therefore, these patients must be on drugs for the rest of their life, right? That's the conclusion that they want to arrive at. And that's the conclusion to which they arrive. So I'm just giving you a little bit of background. I think fibromyalgia has been completely hijacked by the drug companies. And to give you an example of that, other than what I already mentioned, which is most of the articles are sponsored by drug companies, is that this article that I wrote, and this is not even a month old. I just published this last March 3rd is when this came out. So it's less than a month old. Part of the reason, the main reason that I wrote this article was because I think the other author was kind of misusing science, I would say, to promote ultimately the sales of drugs. However, I'm just going to share with you something that happened kind of behind the scenes. So my suspicion was that this author was misusing science, and that's still my conclusion. I mean, that is my opinion, and I'm not changing my idea on that. But the question that arose for me was, why would this guy do that? Because, for example, he says he has no conflict of interest. And I said, well, maybe this is this guy's opinion, and maybe his opinion is just different from mine. But that doesn't make it wrong, of course. Even though I think he's wrong, maybe he's not. So I did some background research on the author of this original study and found out that he was paid by like maybe 4, 5, 6 different drug companies, and that he works for a medical school that just received $1 million from one of the drug companies, right? So I found that to be a pretty strong conflict of interest that was not reported. Perhaps it wasn't reported to the journal, but then I reported it to the journal and they still didn't publish it. So then they're obviously involved in keeping that quiet as well. So anyway, that's my introduction to fibromyalgia, and now we'll get into some of the details. But